So as mentioned, we're going to be in Lesson 5 today, and we will discuss the amazing, the astonishing miracles of Jesus. What we're going to try to accomplish is we're going to define what a miracle is, and we're also going to look at a couple of other terms for miracles, wonders, and signs, and try to distinguish, if we can, between those three terms. We're going to discuss why Jesus performed miracles, and he performed a lot of miracles. We don't really have record of everything that he did, but he touched thousands, literally thousands of people in his 3.5 years ministry using this very important technique called miracles. We're going to talk about how man explains away miracles. There is so much written on the internet. If you were to do an internet search on how did miracles occur, you would see every theory that there possibly is trying to explain away the miraculous events of the miracles performed by Jesus. And then we're going to talk about why miracles are not needed today. A lot of people are questioning what happened to miracles. Some people think miracles continue today. In fact, a lot of people think miracles continue today. And we'll look at a few of those things and talk about why they are not necessary any longer. So let's begin with the words of Peter on the day of Pentecost, as recorded in Acts 2:22. He uses three terms here. Men of Israel, hear these words: Jesus of Nazareth, a man attested by God to you by miracles, wonders, and signs which God did through him in your midst, as you yourselves also know. So he uses this term. He talks about miraculous things using three different terms. So let's look at our first question in your book. In your own words or terms, how would you define a miracle? How would you define miracle? Yes, Kevin. Pretty complete definition. Anybody want to add anything to that? It really has to deal with the intervention of natural law. So it is, as mentioned by Kevin, suspension of what would normally and naturally occur. And it's really only by the intervention of God. It's provision by God. This is something that is not usual at all. Yes? Right. Skill, talent. That's right. That's right. So the birth of our first grandchild, to us, we might use the term, that was miraculous. No, that is natural. There have been births for thousands and thousands of years, right? It's pretty great, but it's not a miracle. That sunrise or that sunset is not a miracle. It's about time for us to start planting. So for those of you who have gardens, and just the germination of seed to produce a plant, to me, I'm still amazed at that, but it's not a miracle. Yes? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Exactly. Hold that point, because we're going to talk about the characteristics of miracles, and you certainly hit upon one of those. So, what is the difference then? What is the difference between a miracle and a mighty work? Well, you'll see those used interchangeably in many translations, a miracle and a mighty work. This is something that is strong, it's impressive. Well, what about then, what's the difference between a miracle and a wonder? So we saw back in this passage, miracles and then wonders. What's a wonder? Yes, Kevin.
Produced
Mm-hmm. That's right. So it is this impact of astonishing. It astonishes the beholder. It grabs their attention. It has an immediate impact upon the spectators. They're amazed. And we can see this, actually, if I can get to it, in Mark 2:12. In Mark 2:12, actually beginning of verse 10, this is the story of the man who was sick of the palsy. And we could talk about what the palsy is separately, but he was affirmed for many, many years. And he is being led by four men up to the rooftop, if you recall, and they broken up the roof, and they let him down in the midst of Jesus as Jesus is teaching in that room. Here's what it says. It says, immediately he arose, and Jesus healed him, of course. He took up his bed and went out in the presence of them all, so that they were all amazed and glorified God. That was a wonder. It was a miracle, but it really created an element of astonishment or bewilderment. They were amazed at what happened. So what is a sign? The other term is a sign. Miracle, wonder, or sign. What's a sign? Yes, Kyle.
It's on the fact that this is something about the one who performs it.
Mm-hmm. Gives proof of something. It attests to a mission or a message or the credibility of the individual. So these are used interchangeably, you'll see, in the New Testament, but they have slightly different meanings. So let's now focus on our remaining time on the miracles that Jesus performed. So as mentioned, Jesus was truly a miracle worker. There are 37 miracles that are recorded. Now, that's recorded miracles. If you include his virgin birth, and his resurrection and his ascension as miracles, which I would, then you have at least 40 miracles that were performed by Jesus in his short period of time on this earth. It's amazing. And we also know that there were many people healed on a single occasion. So any idea how many people were impacted by miracles? By the miracles performed by Jesus? Rough numbers? Well, you'd have to say of just the men alone, at least 10,000, because we know in the creation of the loaves and fishes, that impacted at least 9,000 men, not including the women and children that were present. And if you look at passages like this, and many other signs truly Jesus did in the presence of his disciples, which were not written in this book, we have no idea how many people were personally impacted, but it had to have been thousands and thousands. So what types of miracles did Jesus perform? Well, let's just look at a quick summary here. Well, he healed people of disease. In fact, there are at least 24 instances of Jesus healing the sick and the lame in the Gospels. He opened the eyes of the blind, he unstopped the deaf ears, he unloosed the dumb tongues, he caused the lame to walk. At least 4 instances of blind men, eyes being opened, at least 3 instances that we can find easily of the ears of the deaf and mute being unstopped. We know he fed the hungry. 2 instances, miraculously, of those who were fed. There were instances of Jesus calming the mighty storms. There were at least 4 instances of Jesus casting out demons or evil spirits. There was an instance of Jesus healing a man with withered hands. Of course, that was on the Sabbath. And there were 2 instances of Jesus healing those who could not stand up erect. And finally, probably the most astonishing of all, is Jesus healing or raising the dead. This is 3 instances recorded that we have recorded in the New Testament. And we're going to look at least one of those today. Just amazing, given especially how long they had been deceased. Yes. Walked on the water. Absolutely. I guess I left that one out. That's pretty major. We'll actually talk about that one as well. So why did he perform these great miracles, signs, and wonders? Why did he use this technique of miracle signs and wonders so broadly and so frequently in his ministry? Well, we're going to look at the reasons that we have in class. Let's just kind of walk through them. So, first of all, to create or to assure faith in him. So the second miracle that was performed by Jesus is the raising of the nobleman's son. And this is recorded in John chapter 4, verses 46 through 54. Let's just read through this quickly and then see if you can see evidence of this purpose or this reason coming to bear. And that is to assure faith in Him as being from God and miraculous. So Jesus came down to Cana of Galilee, where He had made the water to wine, which was the first miracle. And there was a certain nobleman whose son was sick at Capernaum. When he heard that Jesus had come out of Judea into Galilee, he went to him and implored him to come down and heal his son, for he was at the point of death. And Jesus said to him, "Unless you people see signs and wonders, you will by no means believe." So Jesus is basically saying, you guys are expecting a sign and a wonder. And he's going to deliver on that as well. The nobleman said to him, "Sir, come down before my child dies." And Jesus said to him, "Go your way, your son lives." So the man believed the word that Jesus spoke to him, and he went his way. And as he was now going down, his servants met him and told him, saying, "Your son lives." And he inquired of him the hour when he got better. And they said to him, "Yesterday at the 7th hour, the fever left him." So the father knew that it was at the same hour that Jesus said to him, "Your son lives." And he himself believed, in his whole household. So an example of creating or providing assurance in Jesus here in the nobleman's son. Another reason is to confirm or to prove true or to verify the truth of what he was revealing or what he was preaching or teaching. Let's look at this one. As we know in this class, we've been talking about the radical teachings of Jesus, right? That's really what Ken has been trying to focus on this quarter. It was God's design that miracles would be used to confirm or to verify or to prove that these words and these events are from God. They're from the authority of God. So we could look at this passage in Mark 16:20. "And he went and preached everywhere, the Lord working with them and confirming the word through the accompanying signs." And then we could flip down into Hebrews chapter 2, 3 through 4. "How shall we escape if we neglect so great a salvation, which at the first began to be spoken by the Lord and was confirmed to us by those who heard him? God also bearing witness both with signs and wonders and with various miracles and gifts of the Holy Spirit according to His own will." So, secondly, to confirm the word He was revealing. And then another reason for use of miracles was to establish the credibility of His claims. So we could look at this passage in John chapter 5, 34 through 36, where He says, "Yet I did not receive testimony from man, but I say these things that you may be saved. He was the burning and shining lamp, and you were willing for a time to rejoice in His light. But I have a greater witness than John's, for the works which the Father has given to me to finish, the very works that I do, bear witness of me, that the Father has sent me." So these extraordinary mighty works prove that Jesus was from the Father, that He was authorized to reveal the Lord's will. So there are at least 5 kind of categories of miracles, 5 general categories of miracles. And let's kind of review these now, and we'll provide an example of each one. There are multiple examples of these, but the power over nature. So this is the ability to trouble the stormy seas, as already mentioned by David there. Power over disease. So He healed the lame, the blind, the afflicted that had any number of diseases and afflictions, some of which we don't even know precisely what they had. Didn't matter. Jesus healed them all. And power over the spirit world and demons. He cast out unclean spirits. Power over material things. He was miraculously able to multiply bread and fishes such that there was so much left over. They had more left over than they started with. And then finally, this category of power over death. At least 3 examples of that. So let's go back now, and let's go back and look at power over nature, and let's look at an example of Jesus walking on water. And we're going to look at the Matthew 14, verses 22 through 26. A familiar story. This miracle is only recorded by Matthew. It's interesting. There are some miracles that are recorded by all the gospel writers and some that are only by a couple or only by one. What we learn in this miracle is that Jesus' character of extreme faith and trust, but we also see something about Peter in this example as well. So immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side when he sent the multitudes away. When he had sent the multitudes away, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. And when evening came, he was alone there. But the boat was now in the middle of the sea, tossed by waves, for the wind was contrary. Now on the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went to them, walking on the sea. It must have been startling to see this. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, "It is a ghost," and they cried out for fear. And we can skip down now to verses 27. And immediately Jesus said to them, "Be of good cheer, it is I, do not be afraid." And Peter answered him and said, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." And he said, "Come." And when Peter had come down out of the boat, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. But when he saw that the wind was boisterous, he was afraid and began to sink. He cried out, saying, "Lord, save me." And immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and caught him and said, "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased. And then, look what happened in verse 33. And those who were in the boat came and worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." So a demonstration of Jesus' unlimited power, and in this case, his unlimited power over nature, to be able to walk on the sea and calm the stormy seas. Let's go on and talk about now an example of Jesus' power over disease. And we'll just pick the example of the miracle of the centurion's son. And this is recorded in Matthew chapter 8, starting in verse 5. So a centurion is a Roman soldier in charge of at least 100 men. It would be like the equivalent of a sergeant today. And he approaches Jesus about his servant who was paralyzed. And when Jesus entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him, pleading with him, saying, "Lord, my servant is lying at home paralyzed, dreadfully tormented." And Jesus said, "I will come and heal him." So what was the outcome of this miracle? What happened? Was he healed? Yes, Vicky. What great faith. And Jesus uses that great faith of this Gentile man for a teaching moment. And so we could continue on and look at Matthew 8, looking at about verse 10 or so. When Jesus heard it, he marveled and said to those who followed, "Assuredly, I say to you, I have not found such great faith, not even in Israel. And I say to you that many will come from east and west and sit down with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven." And then it went on to verse 13. Jesus said to the centurion, "Go your way as you have believed, so let it be done to you." So just the expression of faith and trust in Jesus. Jesus didn't even have to be present. He healed the servant that very same hour. So let's go on to another example now. We'll go on to look at Jesus' power and his unlimited power over the demonic world. And these are very interesting miracles to occur. Let's look at the example in Mark chapter 5, verses 5 through 9. So this is a man that we have here in this passage in the country of the Gadarenes. This is located on the eastern side of the Sea of Galilee. And this man is very dangerous. This man is literally out of control. He is out of his physical mind. He's out of his mental mind. He's dangerous. Everyone was afraid of him. In fact, they tried to bind him with shackles and with chains, and he would break them loose. It was an extraordinary situation. It was really a dangerous situation for Jesus to approach. And they came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gadarenes. And when he had come out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit, who had his dwelling among the tombs. And no one could bind him, not even with chains, because he had often been bound with shackles and chains. And the chains had been pulled apart by him, and the shackles broken in pieces. Neither could anyone tame him. And as always, night and day, he was in the mountains and in the tombs, crying out and cutting himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and worshipped him. And he cried out with a loud voice, saying, "What have I to do with you, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I implore you by God that you do not torment me." Interesting that the demons, the unclean spirits, recognize the authority and the power of Jesus. Even though there were those who did not believe in the things that they had witnessed, even the unclean spirits had recognized this. And he said to them, "Come out of the man, unclean spirit." And then he asked him, "What is your name?" We could skip down now to verse 11 and see how this continues. And so we know that there was a large herd of swine feeding there near the mountains. So all the demons begged him, saying, "Send us to the swine that we may enter them." And at once Jesus gave them permission. Then the unclean spirits went out and entered the swine, for there were about 2,000. And the herd ran violently down the steep place into the sea and drowned into the sea. So this must have made quite an impression on those around there. If this had been happening today, this would have been a property damage lawsuit, big time, right? Because 2,000 swine to the Gentile swine herder was a lot of money, even in those days. So what happened? What happened? What sort of reaction do you recall this had on the locals there that witnessed this miraculous, exorcism of the swine? Kevin? We're afraid. So, as continuing on in verse 14, so those who fed they fled. They told it to the city. They went out to see what had happened. They came to Jesus. They recognized this man who had been demon-possessed. He was now sitting. He was clothed. He was acting like he was in his right mind. And they were afraid. And those who saw it told what had happened to him. He had been demon-possessed. They began to plead him. They wanted to leave the area. So isn't it the reaction interesting how we see some who believed, some who confessed, some who became disciples, and others who said, "I don't want anything to do with this. That it's too amazing, it's too astonishing, it's too fearful." So it just goes to show that the heart of the believer varies, right? The heart of the recipient or those who witness can vary. And when he got into the boat, he who was demon-possessed begged him that he might be with him. However, Jesus did not permit him. "Go to your friends, tell them what great things the Lord has done for you and how he has had compassion on you." So Jesus had compassion on this man. That's going to be one of the reasons we're going to study in just a few moments. He had compassion on this poor man and on the masses. And he departed. And it said that all marveled. All were astonished by this great thing that had happened. Let's now go look at an example quickly of Jesus' power over material things. We're going to look at the feeding of the 5,000 here. So the miraculous feeding of 5,000, this was not total, this was just the men. It's the only miracle prior to the crucifixion that's recorded in all four Gospels, interestingly enough. This is the only one recorded by all four of the writers. So it was in the evening, this is in Matthew 14, verses 15 through 21. It was in the evening, and the disciples came to him saying, "This is a deserted place, and the hour is already late. Send the multitudes away that they may go into the villages and buy themselves food." In the prior verse, which I didn't show here, it said Jesus was moved with compassion. Moved with compassion. So we see that expression again. His heart is compassionate to those who need healing or need to be fed. And Jesus said to them in verse 16, "They do not need to go away. You give them something to eat." And they said to him, "We have here only 5 loaves and 2 fish." He said, "Bring them to me." He commanded the multitudes to sit down on the grass, and he took the 5 loaves and 2 fish. Looking up to heaven, he blessed and broke and gave the loaves to the disciples. And the disciples gave to the multitudes. And they all ate and were filled. They took up 12 baskets full of the fragments that remained. And now those who had eaten were about 5,000 men, not including women and children. Pretty amazing. More leftovers. They had more leftovers than they began with. 5,000 men were fed. So this is a fulfillment of prophecy. If we look back to Psalms 132 and verse 15, It says there, I will abundantly bless her provision. I will satisfy her poor with bread. So you could say this is fulfillment of prophecy, but it also is clear demonstration of power over physical things. Just an amazing, amazing miracle here. Just one more category to look at, and that is Jesus' unlimited power over death. Probably the most amazing of all. The raising of three examples that we have in Scripture. We'll just look at one example, and that's going to be the raising of Lazarus, his dear, dear friend, Lazarus. This was also incredibly amazing because we're going to learn that Lazarus was dead for at least 4 years, or 4 days, not 4 years, 4 days. And it says that by now, he is so far through the decomposition process that he began to stink. So let's look at this. John 11:38 through 44. Jesus, again groaning in himself, came to the tomb. He had been made aware that his dear friend Lazarus had died. It was a cave, and a stone lay against it. And Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of him who was dead, said to him, "Lord, by this time there is a stench, for he's been dead for 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Did I not say to you that if you would believe, you would see the glory of God?" Then they took away the stone from the place where the dead man was lying. And Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, "Lord, I thank you that you have heard me, and I know that you always hear me. But because of the people who were standing by, I said this, that they may believe that you sent me." Now when he had said these things, he cried with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come forth." And he who had died came out bound, hand and foot, with grave clothes, and his face was wrapped with a cloth. Jesus said to him, "Loose him and let him go." Truly amazing. And if we were to continue down to verses 45 through 46, it says that many of the Jews who had come to Mary and had seen the things Jesus did believed in him. So the impact of these amazing demonstrations of power over nature, over death, over natural causes was that they would believe. They would believe in him. And some of them who went away to the Pharisees and told them the things that Jesus did. So what are some common characteristics that we see in these 5 major categories of miracles? What are some things that we see that were going to help us distinguish between true miracles and so-called miracles today? What would be one? Yes. Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Undeniable, well documented, and witnessed by others. Anything else? I think you mentioned one, Bud. Can you kind of go back to that again? Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Any characteristics? Yes, Kevin. Immediate and complete. That's right. So none of this, you'll get better over time, and the sort of imprecise process. He's healed, he's not healed. It was immediate and it was complete. All performed before them all. Anything else? Yes.
Death and diseases, in most cases, were known by people around them. In some cases, since the individual's birth, it was not like some guy just moved into town and showed up.
Mhm.
These were documented, known cases.
Mhm. Well known. Well known. Yes, Jimmy? Right. Make sure and come hungry. spontaneously miraculous. Any other attributes? Let's look at some of these. So they're, as mentioned, always successful and immediate. Always successful and immediate. So-called miracle workers will attempt a miracle. Usually it requires some level of measure of faith. It's interesting, in not all cases did they have to demonstrate their faith to have a successful miracle. It was on the position of those who performed the miracle and their power. It involved no tricks or gimmicks, right? There was no trickery here, no sleight of hand involved at all. The healings were of actual maladies, not psychosomatic issues or some sort of mental issue or depression or some issues that are not as easy to document. These were well documented, well witnessed, widely witnessed. And then were performed openly before many impartial witnesses. So we would have partial witnesses, believers, present. We would have unbelievers present. And we might also have enemies that were present or witnessed these events. That's going to be important as a credibility factor coming up later on in our discussion this morning. And then what about healed not just some, but all? So there are passages that would say that, let me see if I can find that one here handy. Yes, here it is. In Matthew 8, verse 16. When evening had come, they brought to him many who were demon-possessed. He cast out the spirits with a word and healed all who were sick. All comers were healed who were sick. And then was not limited in method. So you didn't have to even be present to be healed in some cases. In some cases, Jesus would just speak to an individual. As we look in Mark chapter 1, verses 40, he just simply spoke to the leper in this case. And he says, if you are willing, you can make me clean. And he spoke to him and he was immediately cleansed. Some he would touch. He would touch them or they would touch him and a miracle would occur. A couple of examples there, the blind men who begged to touch him, reached out his hand, and then other examples. So we're not questioned even though by those who attributed the source of his miraculous power. So we even have his enemies that are admitting to his signs being performed. Let's look at that in John 11, 47 through 48. And the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered a council and said, what shall we do? We have a problem on our hands. This guy is just tearing up, our world. He's performing these miracles and he's performing many signs. If we let him alone like this, everyone will believe in him. The Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation. Serious threat to the Jewish nation here, right? Even his enemies confirmed that he performed signs. No denial of the veracity of what he had performed. And then, what about those who are neutral? We do have some who don't really, as we say, have a dog in the hunt, right? They're not opposed to him. They're not in favor of him. And this is just one example here. This man came to Jesus by night and said to him, Rabbi, we know that you are a teacher come from God, for no one can do these signs that you do unless God's will is with him. And he became a believer. At least he acknowledged the fact of these miracles being from God. The multitudes are marveled. We read about that in multiple places in Mark 9 and other places. So Jesus performed his miracles publicly before both friend and foe on many occasions. Thousands examined his miracles closely, friend and foe, impartial or partial alike. There was no denial of the veracity of what they witnessed in their eyes. So another reason why Jesus performed miracles was to fulfill prophecy. Let's look at that one, to show his messianic link. In Isaiah 61, verse 1, it says, the Spirit of the Lord God is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me, to preach good tidings to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the opening of the prison to those who are bound. And then another reason is to demonstrate that he was from the Father This is F in your workbook, and we're going to look at John chapter 10, verses 15 through 30. And Jesus answered and said, I told you, and you did not believe. The works that I do in my Father's name, they bear witness of me. But you do not believe because you are not of my sheep. As I said to you, my sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. And I give them eternal life, and they shall never perish, neither shall anyone snatch them out of my hand. My Father who has given them to me is greater than all, and no one is able to snatch them out of my hand. I and my Father are one. Came from the Father, show he was from the Father. And finally, Jesus performed miracles to demonstrate his love and his deep compassion for mankind. We could look at just several instances here, but we'll look at 1 John 4, 16 through 19. And we have known and believed the love that God has for us. God is love. He who abides in love abides in God, and God in him. Love has been perfected among us in this, that we may have boldness in the day of judgment, just because as he is, so we are in this world. And we saw several references. Jesus was moved with compassion in order to act upon those and provide a miraculous event to those. Let's go now and look at question number 5. So in what way did the miracles demonstrate his infinite love and compassion? Didn't mean to have that passage up there, but what way did he show his love, his compassion?
Followers, in that they evidently were so intent on listening to him and learning from him that they did not take provisions, so he fed the multitude.
Pretty amazing, isn't it? That he would, in effect, instruct them not to be concerned about those physical things, right? He's going to provide for them. As he did so in several instances here. Anything else? Yes? In some cases, it might have been spit on the ground to heal the blind man. It might have been those 5 loaves and 2 fishes, or whatever he had. It didn't take a whole lot for him to produce a miracle. Yes, Kyle. Solid foundation, irrefutable foundation for his power and his connection and his mission. So let's summarize now why Jesus performed so many miracles. To create and to assure faith in him, to confirm the word that he was revealing, to establish the credibility of his claims, to demonstrate his unlimited power over the 5 categories we talked about, and to show he was the Messiah, to show that he was from the Father, and to demonstrate his infinite love and compassion. So many people today believe that miracles are still occurring today. If you do just a quick internet search, you'll see tons of websites that talk about this. We have a recent personal example in Dorothy's brother-in-law, who was a preacher, or what he would call pastor, of a large denomination that believes in miracles. Sadly, Dale was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and his congregation immediately began to pray for a miracle to cure him. Within 2.5 months, he sadly passed away. He died. And so that created a real consternation for his congregation. As we went to that funeral, much of the funeral service was trying to explain what happened, how it could have been that they could have prayed so earnestly for a miracle and that miracle not to occur. So why are miracles not happening today? Why are miracles not happening today? Kevin. everything else. So the miracles confirmed the truth. They confirmed also the word for the apostles in their performing the miracles. It has been revealed. It has been confirmed. And the passage that I think I want to read real quickly is the passage referred to by Kevin in 1 Corinthians 13, 8-9. Love never fails, but whether there are prophecies, they will fail. Whether there are tongues, they will cease. Whether there are knowledge, it will vanish away. We know in part and we prophesy in part. But when that which is perfect has come, that which is in part shall be done away. So the need for miracles, now that we have the revealed word, the need for miracles is no longer there. We have all that we need. We've been bestowed with all that we need to believe and to know what God would have us to do. The miraculous is going to cease, but love is not going to cease. Therefore, to try to explain and to expect miracles today in the way that we see in the New Testament, in the first century, would not be appropriate. And anyone who claims they can perform miracles would be clearly a false teacher. So, how do miracles performed by Jesus differ from the miracles of so-called miracle workers today? What are some of those characteristics that we reviewed that are different from what you've seen on TV or you've heard about? Yes, Jane Ellen? They worked. They worked. Immediate, complete, all those things we talked about. Other characteristics, Kevin?
Point people will run in Mark chapter 8 and use the two-step process of dealing with time.
Yeah.
Characteristic of miracles that takes multiple.
Oh, yeah. It is. So let me just give you one reference. If you may have heard about Benny Hinn Ministries, who you look at his website on the very first page. It says miracles still happen today. Blind eyes still receive their sight. Deaf ears still begin to hear. The crippled and the lame will leap to their feet and walk. God's unchanging character is certain. He truly desires to pour out blessings on His children, and as His child, you can expect Him to be showered on you, even by the God of our Father. He actually quotes Scripture. Miracles are certainly part of the vast provision God has made available for you. Whether a miracle occurs instantaneously or a process of time, God does heal today and forever! Exclamation point. It's so interesting that in just a paragraph below that, he has the same page. My urgent appeal to you is this: I need for you to hear me today, to know that you're standing with me to help me pay for the massive expenses of our crusades and television ministry and mission outreaches. The need is urgent, and I know I will hear from you. God will speak to you. I know you love Him enough to hear His voice. So we must question anyone who would be claiming to perform miracles today. Thank you very, very much.